Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement podcast with Dr. Thomas Hemingway. Have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I thought I'd be healthier, in better shape, feel better both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and be further along in my life? If so, come on this journey with my dad as he explores all things health and wellness from a holistic medical perspective, even as a classically trained physician. He'll share integrative strategies to optimize health and inspire you to join the modern medicine movement.
Welcome, everyone, to the modern medicine movement. And a big aloha. Thomas Hemingway here, and I'm super grateful, super excited to be with you. And just want to give a big shout out to my son, Isaac. He just crushed that intro. I just love that. Thanks to my wife, Brooke, who's continued to encourage me. And thanks to all you who are listening, taking the time out of your busy lives, taking the time out for yourselves, for your health, for your families, because really at the end of the day, this podcast is for you to help you achieve optimal health, total and complete health of your mind, your body, your spirit, your emotions, your relationships, even financial health. We're going to throw that in one of these upcoming podcasts. Truly, everything health is fair game here. And I'm right there with you on this journey. And I just want to add value to you and your loved ones. And so just keep the feedback coming. I am here to serve you. And by popular demand from your feedback, I'm actually adding today an entire podcast specifically on gut health. Last week, we talked about the microbiome and how interesting that is. I just loved that. I appreciate all your comments and I did a little bit of introductory information on gut health, but really didn't have enough time to really do it justice and really get into what we can do, the things that we can affect and specifically do to get and maintain great gut health. So I wanted to really get into that today. It's a super exciting topic, and I think it's something that we can all benefit from no matter where we're at in our lives. It's really something from birth to, our passing of this life that this can really, really, really enhance, affect, and help us to live better and healthier. And I know right now a lot of us have health on our minds. It's a lot going on in the world with the pandemic, stressful. We're all concerned about our personal health, that of our families, our loved ones. We don't want to get sick, and we want to be able to do whatever we can to enhance our immune system and avoid getting ill. And, things I talked about in a previous podcast, on the coronavirus, I still believe and want you to hear again, today, the importance of the social distancing, the importance of, good hygiene measures to, not get sick in the first place. And just remember, social distancing does not have to equal social isolation. I hope that all of us can actually be more connected, albeit virtually, but use this as actually enhancing our social connection through, our messaging of our friends, family, and loved ones, whatever we can do to stay in touch with them virtually. I think this time is so important that we dig in and we reach out and we help. And many of this will have to be done virtually, and that's okay. We can connect. We can be connected as a people so we can fight this thing, and we can do it, and we can do it together. There's so much that we can do, so much positive influence we can have. And right now, starting with ourselves, there's a lot that we can do to be able to enhance our own immune systems, to enhance our own gut health, not just for this, but for our lives. It's just such an important thing. And it's super exciting. I love this topic. So let's just get into it. So as previously discussed last week in our microbiome podcast, we talked about gut health a little bit, which basically pertains to the balance of the microorganisms that live in our digestive tract, which is actually the primary source of the microbes in our microbiome, which we discussed makes up some 30 to 100 trillion cells, which actually far outweighs the number of our own human cells. And of course, far outweighs the DNA found in our microbiome is much greater than that of our own human DNA. Remember that, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 genes have been sequenced in the human genome, and our microbiome, which largely includes our gut flora, has in the millions of genes, maybe up to some 46 million by some counts. And this is ongoing as we have the Human Microbiome Project in the same way as the Human Genome Project. Super exciting. So yes, absolutely, we need to pay attention. We need to be able to have a great balance of our gut microbes, because they can significantly impact our health for the good or for the contrary. And the choice is ours, right? The choice is ours. So looking after the health of our gut and maintaining the right balance of our microbiota is therefore, it's vital and it's integral for our physical health, as we've talked about, our mental health, but also for our immunity. So in order to maximize and enhance that performance and the usefulness of our gut microbes, we need to do certain things and we need to avoid certain things. So certain things are out there that will harm us. So let's start with that. I'll just call these things the gut wreckers. So gut wrecker number one is antibiotics. And we have talked a little bit about this in the first episode in the microbiome. And, I, as a physician, have certainly prescribed lots of antibiotics. And if they are necessary, they can be life-saving and have and will continue to save millions of lives when used appropriately. But unfortunately, all too often, they're used indiscriminately and without a good indication, i.e., inappropriately, right? Like the example of that person, none of us, of course, right? But that person who goes to their doctor every time they have a cough or a cold, and they always want that Z-Pack because the last time they had their sinus infection or these symptoms, it helped them. So they want another prescription. Well, I got news for you. I think you know this, but most of the time these things are actually caused by viruses, and antibiotics don't help anyway. And they can certainly harm and hinder us personally with our, microbiome being significantly impacted, but also as it relates to drug-resistant strains and our population at large, this can be significantly adversely effective. And in fact, I just read on the CDC's website today that nearly 50%, this number is staggering. I'm just going to say it again, 50%, nearly 50% of all outpatient antibiotic prescriptions, this is according to the CDC website, are inappropriate, or in other words, unnecessary, for these things like a cough or a sinusitis, maybe a little bit of a sore throat or a little bit of an earache, all these kinds of things that oftentimes people run to their doctors, and often their doctors even call these things in for people. They are very, very frequently, up to 50% as reported by the CDC, unnecessary. And not only can antibiotics harm and hinder our good microbes in our gut, but this can last for months, and in some studies, up to 2 years. Certain species of good bacteria called Bacteroides can be affected by up to 2 years by one single course of antibiotics. Imagine that. So only use them appropriately. We got to be careful as a society of what I sometimes refer to, and my friends kind of laugh at me, but I sometimes refer to this phenomenon as Burger King medicine or the have it your way medicine, right? Often people ask us for things as physicians, like a prescription for antibiotics or what have you, although they're not indicated and they're not necessary, sometimes just because it's easier to call that thing in or write out a quick prescription than to take the 10 or 15 minutes to discuss why it's not necessary. All too often, we prescribe them unnecessarily. So I'm hoping to basically bring this to the forefront of all of our minds that there are, side effects and potential downsides to antibiotics, and they should only be used appropriately. And remember, I'm speaking from myself. I am a physician, but I'm not your physician, so I'm not giving medical advice. These are my opinions, but I think, it's important to hear this because they are founded with true actual data. And so, antibiotics can as mentioned, be extremely helpful when they're indicated, but all too often can be used unnecessarily. And just a single course can affect us for months and even possibly years. And this, unfortunately, often happens way too early in life, as we discussed about with the microbiome, that sometimes these babies, born via C-section, get antibiotics early on, and often unnecessarily, and they can really wreak havoc on a developing immune system and a developing gut and microbiome. So please avoid any unnecessary prescriptions, and even, just discuss it with your doctor. Every single time they give you a prescription, discuss it with them, because they may be doing it only because they think that's what you want. And let's just make sure that it's indicated and it's appropriate, not only for our own preservation and our gut flora, our gut health, preservation, but also for the society at large, because as we know, there's too many strains out there of multi-drug resistant bacteria that have largely been caused by us, by me as a physician, and by many of us over the years asking for and receiving inappropriate antibiotic prescriptions. Think about bacteria like MRSA or the MRSA, that's that nasty skin bug, or think about VRE, vancomycin resistant enterococcus. There's all these different drug-resistant strains out there that are primarily caused by overuse of antibiotics. So something to think about. It's definitely a gut wrecker, and if you can avoid them, please don't take them. But please discuss each and every time you take them with your physician. Make sure that it makes sense, that it's appropriate, because you don't want to be harming yourself or your gut bacteria or society with influencing the increase of multi-drug resistant strains of bacteria out there either. So enough of that. Moving right along, the second gut wrecker I'm going to talk about is, no big surprise, but alcohol use. Especially too much or regular alcohol use can not only cause many other serious problems, but one of the problems that occurs is dysbiosis, which we've talked about as the imbalance of the gut bacteria, which leads to many problems like, altered food cravings, bloating, weight gain, yeast overgrowth. Big surprise, right? The yeast is actually used in the production of a lot of alcoholic beverages. IBS, which is irritable bowel, IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, or Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, leaky gut, celiac, gluten sensitivity, vaginitis, food allergies, chronic fatigue, depression, skin conditions like acne, rosacea, eczema. All these things can occur as a result of dysbiosis, and regular alcohol consumption can certainly lead to that. Now, a little bit of red wine here and there, like has been sometimes recommended for cardiac health, is probably okay. And in fact, red wine in particular tends to have what's called polyphenols, which are actually, beneficial to certain good bacteria of the gut. So in moderation and in small amounts, a little bit of red wine is probably okay, but let's not overdo it, and let's not, have too regular of alcohol consumption, because it can cause a lot of issues. And so that's the next major gut wrecker is alcohol consumption. The third one is also not a big, surprise or mystery, but the third gut wrecker, if you will, is a sedentary lifestyle, right? None of us want to have a sedentary lifestyle, because that's not good for us in too many ways. But what's interesting is they have actually done a lot of recent studies looking at sedentary versus regular physical activity with respect to gut health. And the regular physical activity actually increases the diversity of the gut species. And as we talked about last time, it's not just your investment portfolio that benefits from increased diversity, also the diversity of our gut microbes. Our gut bacteria is a really good thing, right? So we can keep the bad or pathogenic bacteria in check and have lots of different species of good bacteria. And so increasing the gut diversity is a good thing, which exercise has been shown to do. Also, interestingly enough, higher fitness levels and increased exercise has been associated with a greater abundance of butyrate. Butyrate now is a short-chain fatty acid, or SCFA. That's important not only for our overall health, and it tends to be produced by these good bacteria in our gut. So higher production of butyrate, this SCFA has also been shown with increased exercise, which is fantastic. So they've looked at this in different athletes. They've looked at this in the lay people that are exercising more than the sedentary folks. And they've also seen that not only can the diversity be increased of the gut bacteria, but also certain levels of the good bacteria, like, for example, bifidobacteria as well as Akkermansia. Akkermansia now is a bacteria that's shown to play a really important role in metabolic health, as well as the prevention of obesity. And these tend to increase with good, regular exercise. So this is yet another reason to exercise regularly, hopefully 4 or 5 days a week. You don't have to do 7 days a week. It's good for the body to have rest, but 4 or 5 days a week is awesome. Shoot for 5. And, I know it's a little challenging right now with our stay-at-home recommendations, which I also am recommending, and we just got to be a little bit more creative. We might have to bust out those old VHS exercise programs, or just Google a good YouTube exercise program and do something 20 minutes a day, hopefully 5 days or so a week. And we can do it right from our home. Like I've mentioned before, I've had to be a little bit more creative here. My wife's been super creative here, but we're doing it because it's good for us in so many ways. And one of these is improved gut health. A fourth gut wrecker out there, no big surprise on this one either, is, you guessed it, not just alcohol, but also cigarette smoking. Well, big surprise, right? I don't think any of us will be too shocked on this one. Not only, of course, does tobacco smoke contain thousands of harmful chemicals, but at least 70 of them have been shown to be carcinogenic or cancer-causing. And not only do they harm nearly every organ, as well as, of course, increase our risk of heart and lung disease, as well as stroke and cancer, but also they are a risk factor for the inflammatory bowel diseases, like, for example, Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, are at least twice as more common in smokers as opposed to non-smokers. Also, smoking cessation or quitting has been shown to increase the diversity of our gut flora, which, of course, as we've discussed, is a marker of a healthy gut. So quitting smoking, it's interesting because the effects shown in this increased diversity actually tend to happen pretty quickly, in a matter of weeks after cessation. So having quit, we can increase our diversity because the smoking in and of itself tends to decrease the gut flora diversity, which of course is a marker of an unhealthy gut and can lead to dysbiosis, among other things. So suffice it to say, smoking ain't good for us, not for so many things, and of course not for the little guys that live in our gut either. So if you need help, please get it, please quit. 1-800-QUIT-NOW, and there's many other programs. Talk to your physician and get on a program and please quit. It's so good for you in so many ways, and of course good for your pocketbook too. The fifth gut wrecker out there is too little sleep. And I have to admit, I've been guilty of this over the years, but in the last, I'd say maybe 2 years or so, I've really tried to pay attention to my circadian rhythm, which is our 24-hour time clock. And what's interesting is that not only our physical, immediate physiologic self, but also our microbiome pays attention to this same 24-hour time clock or circadian rhythm. And it's been shown that sleep deprivation not only is linked to certain diseases like heart disease, obesity, insulin insensitivity, diabetes, etc., but it's also been shown that your gut microbes are affected by poor sleep cycles as well as sleep deprivation. And they can be associated with an increase in the bad bacteria that tends to be responsible for weight gain and obesity and type 2 diabetes. So this is actually super interesting to me. Over the years, I've, of course, had to work night shift, and it's definitely not my preference, and I still have to do it when it's my turn, but there are certain people who tend to like, the night shift for whatever reason. And what's interesting is a lot of times I've noticed these people tend to struggle with some of these conditions that I just mentioned. And it may not actually be that they're eating, too much junk food on their shift, which is not always the case, though I have to admit on night shift, we've always had kind of a little candy drawer that is available, and it seems to be used a little bit more at night than during the day. But what's interesting here is that these bacteria that tend to cause weight gain, obesity, insulin resistance tend to be at an increased proportion in night shift workers. And so, something to think about. So it's really, really important to do our best to maintain our diversity of our gut microbes to keep our gut healthy. Because like the example I shared last week, you can have two identical twins, same genetic material, same DNA, one obese, one thin, but what they found to be different, of course, is not their DNA because it's identical, but their gut flora. So this is another example of this, and the obese twin would tend to have the type of preponderance of these not so great bacteria that tend to hang on to calories and sugars and increase the insulin secretion, which shown to put on weight and things. And so that can affect, irrespective of the number of total calories you eat, can affect your weight. So pay attention to your sleep. Do your best to get 7 hours of sleep if you can, and make it a regular, predictable thing. It can be hard in night shift workers, but you can kind of flip-flop your clock around and, try to make it predictable, make it quality, and make it 7 hours if you can, because that's another potential gut wrecker, is bad or too little sleep. So the sixth gut wrecker is too much bad stress. So not only can stress adversely impact a lot of other body systems, but it's not good for the gut either, at least not in its negative way. I'm going to give a whole podcast later on about stress and about what we can do, because we all have stress. I've had lots and lots of stress over my life and continue to have stress, right? It's no easy thing to raise 6 kids, to work, to have a wife who works, all the things that we do certainly can be very stressful, but we get to choose how we respond to that stress and what meaning we give to it. I'll give a whole podcast on that because super interesting and I think super exciting, and there's a lot of great material out there. But suffice it to say, in the gut, increased stress has also been shown to adversely affect your gut diversity. So in other words, give you an increased risk of having dysbiosis, okay? And what happens, and has been shown here, is that the bad or less desirable species in the gut, like Clostridium, for example, tend to increase with increasing stress, okay? Whereas Lactobacillus is the good bacteria, tends to decrease in quantities in these stressful situations. This has been shown in both, laboratory animals as well as in humans. They did a recent study on college students, which I thought was pretty interesting. They took a gut or stool sample, if you will, and looked at their microbiome, specifically their gut health in the first semester, right at the beginning, when they're all pumped up, they're excited. Then they took a second sample right at finals time. And guess what? They showed some changes in their gut bacteria at these stressful times of finals, etc. And what they found was a increase in the bad or less desirable bacteria like Clostridium, and a decrease in Lactobacillus, which is one of the good bacteria. So this has been shown. It's been shown in us as humans. And so suffice it to say, it's important that we learn to manage stress because it can adversely affect our gut. So something to think about. Like I said, I'll do a whole podcast on stress coming in the future, but it can be a potential gut wrecker. A seventh one, which can be a gut wrecker, is what I'm just going to refer to as the ultra hygiene problem, which, I think has its roots. We talked about this a lot in the podcast on the microbiome, but has its roots in the industrialized societies that most of us live in, that chlorinate the water, that use pesticides like the glyphosates in our food. And then, we tend to, I think, overdo it with harsh antibacterial and disinfectant soaps. And we can tend to kill a lot of the good bacteria, like Staph epidermis, for example, and the worse bacteria like Staph aureus can take over, causing, all sorts of skin infections like MRSA and other problems. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use hand sanitizers. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we need to take thought and careful consideration to how we, clean ourselves and what we are, not only putting in our bodies, but putting on our bodies. Because remember, our microbiome is also all those organisms that live on us, our skin, our noses. And I think we just need to pay a little bit more attention to these sometimes very harsh things that we put on our bodies, certain deodorants, antibacterial, antiseptic types of soaps. We don't need to be bathing ourselves with these things on a regular basis. Yes, we need to clean our hands, especially if we're, out in a public place and it's in the middle of a pandemic like it is now. We need to wipe down those grocery cart handles and things like that. We need to be smart, but I think in general, we need to be cognizant that general indiscriminate use of these types of antiseptics, if you will, can also be harmful to our good gut bacteria. Like the example I used last time of letting our kids, get outside and play in the dirt is a good thing. We don't have to scrub them vigorously after they come in, because dirt in and of itself, has a lot of good microbes too. It's something that is helpful to have our immune system recognize and get used to. And so letting the kids get a little dirty, it's okay. Anyway, more on that at another time. But the eighth thing I wanted to touch on, which I'm really going to flip that around as not only being the eighth in the gut wrecker potential, but I'm going to turn it into the first and most important in the gut fixing regimen. So the eighth gut wrecker out there is a poor and very limited diet. And, this basically is unfortunately too common in our Western society. We eat too many processed foods in general, too many simple carbs. And really what's interesting is if you look at, say the last 50 to 100 years of what our mainstream, Western diet has been composed of, instead of getting more and more broad, which you would think with time, we'd be able to eat so many different and diverse things. But actually, what's been interesting is we are tending to narrow in and eat less diverse foods, which is actually not a great thing for us as humans and not a great thing for our microbiome and our gut health. In fact, what's interesting is approximately 75% of the world's food supply comes from only about 12 different plant and 5 different animal species. 75% of the entire world's food supply comes from only 12 plant and 5 animal species. That is just not diverse enough. Remember, diversity is key. We need to have a diverse diet. So the eighth gut wrecker out there is a poor and a limited diet. So there's more out there, but I don't want to overwhelm you, but that's a good start of the things we need to pay attention to, try to avoid. And now we're going to go ahead and go to the ways we can improve our gut flora. So the gut wreckers we talked about. Now let's spend the latter half of this talking about the gut fixers, if you will. I think, most of us have heard of, probiotics and probiotic-rich food, but also we need to pay attention to prebiotics. And you might say, what? What is that? Is that something you just invented, a prebiotic? Nah, I didn't invent it. I wish I had, but I didn't. Prebiotics are just as important to our diet as probiotic-rich foods, okay? So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's sort of the starting point, right? A prebiotic is actually a fiber-rich food that we eat, which often is indigestible for us. So it may not have any significant nutrient value to us as humans, but actually provides a very important food source for the bacteria that live in our gut. So it tends to be mostly indigestible. They're often referred to as resistant carbohydrates. They tend to be fiber rich. Okay, these prebiotic foods tend to be things like asparagus, broccoli, and here's the cool part. This I got to admit, I didn't know prior to a few years ago that the most prebiotic rich part of broccoli and asparagus actually comes from the stems. And what do we do when we cook up these things? All too often, we chop off the bottom part and we just eat the tops, the so-called crowns. Well, let me tell you, it would be better if we didn't do that. Because maybe they're not as tasty and we don't enjoy them as much, but they're actually super, super, super helpful and healthy for our good gut bacteria because they are prebiotics, this indigestible fiber. It's actually really, really good for us. So don't go clipping off the ends of your asparagus or broccoli anymore. Try to eat that part too, okay? You can do it. I'm committing to do that too. So another great prebiotic-rich food, which I happen to love, is the Brussels sprouts. They're amazing. Cook them up with a little bit of garlic, and you got a double win here. Garlic, as we know, has antibacterial and antifungal properties. It helps keep bad bacteria in check, those checks and balances in our gut. And, of course, it makes it tasty. So Brussels sprouts with a little garlic, double up with a little olive oil, and you got a triple dose of the good stuff for you because olive oil is also very good for our gut. Okay, things like bananas are great. They have that good prebiotic fiber in there, especially green bananas. You can even cook with these, substitute them for like a potato. In fact, I spent a couple of years in the past in Central America, and I learned to love green bananas. I wish I could find them more around here and be able to cook them in the way that they did because they were so tasty. We would have these cooked green bananas. You could actually just boil them and throw some sour cream on there. Oh, that is just, makes me salivate. So good. Or these fried green bananas and, fry them in the good oils, right? A little bit of coconut oil, a little bit of olive oil, And, there's nothing like a fried green banana. Anyway, bananas, chicory, ginger, Jerusalem artichokes, onions, legumes. Those are your beans, your peas, chickpeas, lentils, whole grains like oats, okay? We're not talking about a bunch of breads and whatnot. Those are actually not great. They have too many of the refined sugars and things, so watch out for the breads. If you do happen to really like bread and you can't get rid of it from your diet, try to eat sourdough bread, right? The more sour, the better, right? Because it's going to have some probiotics in there. But definitely do your best to try to avoid refined sugars, anything with high fructose corn syrup. That stuff is like death. Try to avoid that stuff. Avoid it. But as mentioned, these foods, especially these prebiotic-rich foods, which have a lot of these undigestible, resistant starches, so to speak, super good for you via the gut bacteria. Because what they'll do is these bacteria in your gut will actually break these indigestible fibers to you, but they'll break them down because they can do it and process and digest them, and they make the SCFAs, or the short-chain fatty acids, which then tend to be a food source and very important for your own intestinal cells. So on and on, lots of broccoli, lots of asparagus, all this good stuff, right? Artichokes, okay, Brussels sprouts, bananas, all these good resistant starches, okay? Really good. Try to buy local if you can. Try to buy organic, non-GMO, because if we do that and we know that there's no pesticides on there, we could even kind of eat them dirty, as they say, right? There's been whole books written about this, that eating these good organic, locally grown vegetables without, rinsing the heck out of them can actually be good for us because they have good flora and bacterial nutrients that are good to help our gut be more diverse, as mentioned. So we want to avoid, the GMO containing ones, those that were used or grown with chemicals like the Roundup, which has, glyphosate and things like that. So try to, eat local, eat organic, non-GMO, all that good stuff. Okay. Also, I mentioned this briefly, but we should really try to say no to the simple refined carbs, right? Say no to sugar. If we just threw out all the sugar in our diet, we would be way better off. Sugar causes tremendous problems with dysbiosis, right? And it increases the populations of the bacteria that are not so awesome. Remember these from last time that actually cause us to get hungry and have cravings of more of that sugary stuff? We got to get rid of this bacteria because they are trying to control us, because if they control us, they will survive. And to them, it's a matter of life and death, right? So try to avoid sugar. Okay, a little bit of natural sugar, like maybe a little bit of honey, is okay, but still try to be sparing, right, with sugar, because we know that too much sugar, not only will increase these colonies of bad bacteria, but also it makes it hard for us to fight infection, right? Think about people that or you've heard of that have bad diabetes, right? They have high blood sugar. They have a really hard time fighting infection. Really hard time with things like wound healing. High sugar is not good, okay? Also, we should avoid things that have artificial sweeteners. They can also be a risk factor in things like diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance. What's interesting is these artificial sweeteners, like aspartame, for example, the stuff that we find in a lot of our diet products, right? Zero sugar, right? 0 calorie does not mean 0 side effects or 0 problems, okay? Because what's interesting about these artificial sweeteners is they actually tend to increase insulin secretion, and they actually help us to put on weight oftentimes. And of course, they're not good for us. Why would we want to be putting another chemical in our body that's been shown in laboratory animals to cause cancer, among other problems, right? Be careful with artificial sweeteners. So it's one of those things that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. What's interesting is once you change your diet, you throw out all this sugar and these simple carbs and things, and you start to eat fresh, whole, organic, non-processed foods, the gut bacteria actually change pretty quickly. You'll start to notice some change within the first couple of weeks, and very soon you'll see that your cravings will change. And that's because you're getting rid of these bad bacteria that tell your brain to crave sugars and carbs and things like that. You're getting rid of them. You're crowding them out with the good bacteria. And this stuff actually starts to happen pretty quickly within a few weeks of changing your diet. So it's awesome. It's something we can change. We can do this. Remember, food is medicine. Food is medicine. So we can affect this. Some other ideas, things to think about, we can always change what we use, for pastas, right? We can do maybe a zucchini noodle, or we can do like the cauliflower crust in a pizza or something. So if we love Italian, like I do, I'll be honest, I'll admit, I really love Italian food, but I've started to experiment, with things like cauliflower crust, and I think it's all right. I can eat it just fine, and zucchini noodles. Hey, I've done that too. I actually like it. I mean, I think I just love vegetables, but, throw some pasta sauce on there. Hey, it's pretty good, other things I mentioned, we can do like green bananas, and we can use those for potatoes. We can add a bunch of onions, peppers, spinach to things. And, there's some substitution things here. We don't have to starve ourselves. We can eat, but we just got to eat the right stuff, right? And as I mentioned, we got to avoid as much as we can the sugars. And if we do have a little bit of a craving, try for something natural, like maybe, grab a date or nuts. Actually, in our house, we completely changed the way we look at this. We used to have snacks laying around for the kids to eat. When they got a little hungry, they do homeschool. So they like to have a little snack, after an hour or two of school or whatever. And what we've done is we've gotten rid of all that processed carbohydrate junk, and we've put a bunch of different bowls of fresh fruits and berries on the countertop, like blueberries, strawberries, bananas. Also, a bunch of different types of nuts, walnuts, cashews, even, these things. Almonds are amazing for gut health. So we've just kind of changed what we have available to snack on. Instead of just snacking on the garbage, we can snack on the good stuff, like good, high quality nuts. So, and to be honest, I've learned to really not only like these, good, healthy snacks, but I mean, I actually love them. I could eat a handful of nuts a couple times a day, almonds. Whew, I love that stuff. As long as we put a little bit of salt on there, I love salted almonds. Anyway, so try to eliminate the sugars, try to eliminate the processed foods, stay as natural and clean as possible. If you can avoid the GMO and the other, pesticide-laden things, please try to avoid the artificial sweeteners, and I know I'm giving you a lot of information. Don't worry about memorizing it all. I'm going to, at a later date, haven't done it yet, but I will make up a little bit of a summary and send out a newsletter to all those that subscribe to it. It'll be a free newsletter. I'll put in some health topics from time to time, so you can check out the website here that'll be in the show notes, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. And you can sign up to get that newsletter. So I know it's a lot of stuff, a lot of information, super awesome stuff, super interesting, but it's a lot. So you'll get later, if you desire, you can sign up for the email newsletter, and I can shoot that out to you. So don't worry about writing everything down. But at the end of the day, I just want you to know there's so much that we can do, right? So many good things we can eat. We just talked a lot about prebiotic stuff. There's lots of probiotic stuff that we can eat in our diet. The one that I tend to like the most, I have to say, is, the Greek yogurt. I don't so much love other things like kimchi and sauerkraut, tempeh, and all these fermented vegetables, miso, kombucha. I don't really love that all that much, to be honest, but I actually do really like Greek yogurt. But be careful, all yogurt is not created equal. A lot of times they throw in a bunch of sugars. Try to avoid that. Try to avoid, other additives and chemicals. Sometimes they throw in yogurt to give it that kind of smooth consistency. Try to get the most natural, low sugar or no sugar, even better, containing Greek yogurts out there. And if you want to throw in those other things, the kefir, the kimchi, sauerkraut, all that, that's great too. Pay attention to what they put in those too, because not all those are created equal. Some of the kombuchas I was looking at have actually a lot of sugar and different flavorings and things because, by itself, they taste a little, let's just say it's a little bit of an acquired taste. So try to get the kind that's not sugar laden or other, flavoring laden things and so on, and just use it as a base for maybe something else. Throw it in a smoothie or whatever. So at the end of the day, prebiotics, super important. We talked a lot about that. Probiotics, super important. For me, I do the Greek yogurt, and I'll be honest, I add a supplement, actually a couple of different supplements that have probiotics, because I just don't feel like I'm getting enough in my diet. So I'm adding as well things like lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, Saccharomyces, Akkermansia. Remember I talked about those a little bit earlier in the podcast. I tend to, supplement as well, which is just fine. You got to look for good, high quality supplements out there. All supplements are certainly not created equal, but a lot of times, we might have to supplement to get the best possible mix, to get our gut flora as healthy and as diverse as possible. And for me, I just got to do that because, I don't really like many of those probiotic laden foods other than the Greek yogurt. So something to think about. And then when we do, make these, rich, fresh, foods, I tend to make a lot of smoothies because I can make them without any sweeteners at all. Just the frozen berries to me are plenty sweet. I'll throw in all different fresh fruit, frozen fruit. When my bananas are getting a little bit on the, ripe side, I just throw them in the freezer. And I basically use them for, kind of like my ice. I don't usually put ice in my smoothie. I do frozen bananas, I do almond milk, coconut milk, and then I throw in things as well, like spinach. I can even get my kids to eat spinach that way. It's really cool. So when you do smoothies, try not to add sugar. Try to do it without sweeteners, if you will. Also with flours, if you can, try to get brown rice flour is better than just like a white bleached, flour. Try to do like a brown rice flour, an almond flour. There's even green banana flour. I try to eat largely a, plant-based diet. I'm not strictly vegan or strictly vegetarian. I do enjoy some meat, but just in moderation. I love a good filet every once in a while. I love me some good fish, coming from Hawaii. I love fish. So, I don't eat it as my main course. I think if we just kind of adopt a mentality that vegetables become kind of our main course and maybe, the meats and stuff as more of a side dish, I think we'll naturally gravitate towards eating a more plant-rich, plant-based diet, which has lots and lots and lots of benefits. And then when we do eat meat, try to get the best meat out there, right? The grass-fed beef, the eggs that are the cage-free, ones, and those that are not coming from, a host that has been fed antibiotics, So pay attention to those sorts of things. If we can avoid the things that are bad, like too much sugar, too many, dairy things, artificial sweeteners. Really try to avoid the high fructose corn syrup, try to avoid the white rice and the potatoes if you can. Try to avoid processed carbs and these processed oils. These oils, vegetable oils and so on, I kind of mentioned this a little bit as an aside last time. They can be horrible for us. It's a whole nother hour in and of itself to discuss the very, very interesting history in the U.S. that goes behind these vegetable oils and so on, things like Crisco and then the vegetable oil. And, you think, oh, it's coming from a plant. It's got to be good. Well, think again. Most of these are just laden with chemicals. So try to avoid those. In our household, we like to cook with a lot of olive oil, the most pure olive oil that you can find. Also, coconut oil, and avocado oil. Those are the ones we tend to use. We don't really use any vegetable oils. It's hard to find good ones out there. So at the end of the day, we can do so much to improve our diet, to improve the health of our microbiome, because what we eat, remember, not only feeds us, but it feeds our microbiome. And at the end of the day, what I've learned is it's the good, high quality, diverse stuff we put in that matters. It's not so much, counting the calories. We should be eating for fuel, for what we need, based on what activities we're doing. And it's not so much a calorie count. My family members, certain of them were so strict on calorie counting over the years. And I just kind of watched them, like it wasn't even fun for them to eat. And for me, I love to eat. My wife and I went a few years ago to Italy, for example. And oh my gosh, that was the most fun I've ever had eating, the things that they eat. And I just love eating. And I'm a super fit, active, healthy guy. I'm not overweight. And I eat basically whatever I want. And I'm super healthy, but I pay attention to what I'm eating. And so, try to avoid the things that are bad that we talked about, the sugars, the artificial sweeteners, the high fructose corn syrup, all those things. Try to eat a very, very rich, diverse, fresh diet, probiotic, prebiotic, rich diet, with all those good foods that we talked about. Also eating some polyphenol rich foods. These I like. Pay attention, guys. You ready for this? Okay, blueberries. I love blueberries. Very highly rich in the polyphenols. Dark chocolate. Awesome. Gives me an excuse to have a little chocolate every once in a while. Remember, everything in moderation, but dark chocolate is on the list. We talked about red wine sparingly is on the list of the polyphenols. Green tea. These are all digested by the good bacteria in our gut, predominantly in the colon. And they both increase the diversity and the percentage of the good gut bacteria that you want, right? So I like those polyphenols, right? I love the blueberries, the dark chocolate, so there are lots and lots of good things that we can eat. And so I just want at the end of the day, your take home to be that there is so much amazing, healthy foods that we can eat, that this is not a restrictive diet that I'm promoting here. I'm not promoting calorie counting. I'm just promoting paying attention to what we put in our bodies. Put in the best high quality ingredients. Natural is better, of course. Avoid the process if at all possible, because we're not only feeding ourselves, but we're feeding our gut. We're feeding these good helpers, these bacteria that can enhance our lives, right? And not only do they outnumber us, but there's so much good that they can do for us. All the things that they do. Remember, they help us digest our food. They help by regulating and communicating with our immune system. They can help protect us from the bad bacteria out there, right? By crowding them out, getting those bad, C. diff bacteria crowded out so they can't hurt us. Keep those colonies, in check, so to speak. They also produce a lot of vitamins, a lot of the B vitamins that we need, right? B12, riboflavin, pyridoxine, B1, which is thiamine, vitamin K, which we can't really produce. It's something we really need, though, and it comes from the good gut bacteria, okay? It's needed for blood clotting. So many things that our good gut bacteria can do for us. Not only do they do all those good things, we've talked about this as well, that they communicate with our brain, right? The gut is our second brain, if you will. We know that in our gut, the largest percentage of all of our body's serotonin is actually made in the gut, right? Also the good happy hormone dopamine, a lot of it's made in the gut. So these gut bacteria, we got to think of them not as foe, like we mentioned in sort of the theoretical original germ theory, right? We kind of looked at all bacteria as foe. Well, hey, here's, 30 million of them that we really need to be our friends, because as our friends and colleagues and symbiotically working together, we can be so much more healthy. And at the end of the day, we can do something about this. We can affect this. We can cause this positive change in our gut. So let's go out there, guys. Let's change our gut and at the same time, change our life. You can do this. Let's do this, and let's do this together. So keep up the good work. Keep the good feedback coming. Let me know what other questions you have. I'm just excited for you, excited for us, for this journey together. I'm having so much fun with this. I hope you guys are too. I hope I've added value to your lives and that you can use these things to live better, live more healthy, and to live well. Health and wellness is my goal. I hope it's yours too. Come on this journey with me, and we can do this. So change your gut and change your life. Until next time, Thomas Hemingway here, sending you a big aloha.